Hello and welcome to this interview series ahead of Cloud and Cybersecurity Expo on the 6th and 7th of March at Excel London. I'm Rebecca Offendale, tech reporter at Techarati, and today my guest is Marcin Roth, Senior Cybersecurity Manager at Currys. Marcin Roth will appear at Cloud and Cybersecurity Expo in March, but today we're going back in time to talk about 3 significant years in Marcin's life that has shaped their life and career. So thank you, Marcin, for coming along today. And what is the first year that you have prepared for us?
Thanks very much, Rebecca. Pleased to meet you. The first year I chose was 2017, and this was after many years of having worked in the public sector within the healthcare space. I got my first role in the private sector, and particularly within IT. I don't have an IT background. I've got a law degree. And then, as I say, I worked in public healthcare policy. So it was quite a departure from what I had done previously. I joined Diageo at the time, a FTSE 100 company. I think we all know what they do. They're an umbrella brand for various beverages. And it was an IT compliance program that had 5 or 6 projects within it, all various sizes, various levels of complexity. And I essentially transferred my project and program skills across to that role to manage the program as best I could. And there was a finance aspect to that as well in terms of managing budgets. And I did that for 2 years on a contract. And it was fascinating. And it was a real sort of journey of discovery. And certainly difficult because I was grappling with concepts and ideas that I was previously unfamiliar with. So it was quite the learning curve. But I think it stood me in good stead for the future, for the subsequent roles that I had, and has shaped my life and my career up till now. So a very positive experience.
What prompted this transition? You said that you had no previous IT background. I'm just curious to know, what was it that made you change your career path in this way?
It was fortuitous in many ways that I had a colleague at Diageo at the time that pulled me in, and there was a sudden need to run the program. And I was told that the transferable skills that I had would be applicable. I think at the time, it was a number of years ago now, I think I was looking for a job change anyway, not to move in the private sector, funny enough, to actually stay within what was government, central government. But I thought, why not? It was a foray into something different. I was helping somebody out by the same token, and I happened to be free at the time, so I jumped.
What were some of the things that you could transfer over from your previous role in being in government consultancy and then working for the private sector? What are some of those skills and how do you think that they were applicable to this role at the time?
I think it was broadly around organisational skill and perhaps a little paradoxically an agile way of working. And I know government doesn't always work in an agile way, but where I landed certainly did. And I had some experience of working in an agile manner, so that certainly helped me. As I say, in my consultancy role in the public sector, I was partially responsible for managing certain budgets and certain expenditure, not fully, because obviously I wasn't a permanent civil servant, but I was, working on spreadsheets in the background and helping with budget profiling, and certainly being accountable for money spent in the private sector at a much larger scale, by the way, because the volumes are different. That was transferable. I'd had that budgetary experience from previously, so that certainly helped. Outside of that, I think an understanding of actually getting the foundations right, whether it's within public healthcare policy or IT or in fact any vertical or sector, people tend to go after the things that are particularly difficult and strategic, which is all very well and good. But getting baselines right, whether it's IT hygiene, whether it's writing a fairly simple healthcare policy that people understand, almost an approach of going back to basics and making sure that the foundations are correct and that what you're producing and articulating is understandable by the people that it's reaching, by the audience. I think that stood me in good stead as well. There wasn't a huge amount that was transferable, but in terms of the skills and attributes and ways of working, I think there was a lot of parallel there.
And how is your way of working? What are your kind of strategies that you apply to these kind of positions?
I've had to adapt in certain respects, given the sort of various roles that I've had. And obviously, they're all quite particular and nuanced and require different things. Not so much a different skill set, but perhaps a different outcome. I like to work in a way that isn't chaotic. And I think it's very easy to say that. And where I'm at the moment in retail, which we'll move on to, it is incredibly fast-paced. I prefer to have a certain amount of meetings every day and not too many so that I can manage my time appropriately. I think it's always important to have a bit of downtime in the sense of sitting back and thinking about, the direction of travel, the scope of the work that you're responsible for, what the ultimate outcomes should be, and shooting for those, and just not doing things in a panicked way, and always having a focus on outcomes and goals. So that's generally how I tend to work. And the other aspect, of course, is being collaborative. I've previously worked in various teams in the past, most of which have been cross-functional by the nature of the work that we've done. The same is true of Currys at the moment, where I am. Obviously, we're a huge retailer, and I don't interface into customers, but there are a lot of cross-functional teams behind the scenes that work closely together. So again, a sort of ethos of team working, of collaboration. I think that's inescapable. And if people work in silos, then I don't think you quite get the outcomes and the benefits of working in that way. So be open, collaborate, and sort of achieve things in a team environment or with a team ethos. I think those areas are critical.
And for you, what is one of the most critical aspects of securing a company's technology infrastructure?
I think it always goes back to basic IT hygiene. Whether that's patching servers, whether that's making sure that the servers, virtual machines, whatever physical or virtual environment that you're using to perform business processes and functions is patched, is up to date, has relevant security tooling running across it, and that you've got visibility of what it is that you're supposed to be managing. Very often companies fall into, I think in some ways, a false sense of security, whereby they think that their environments are secure, almost secure by design, which is a phrase that we use in cyber quite often, and they're not. And it's probably because there isn't a frequent cycle of review, but also people say, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, which is a very bad approach to take. And the problem is that if you don't continually transform and modernize, you end up with a lot of legacy debt, which is then essentially unsecurable, and it exposes you up to a lot of risk. So the foundational aspect of managing your estate and making sure it's clean and healthy, quite frankly, is probably the best approach that you can take. And of course, you have to set aside budget proactively in order to do that, and do it year on year or in 2 or 3 year cycles, dependent upon your strategy, because you have to be able to fund it, and it isn't cheap. But if you don't work in that way, you end up getting sort of caught on the hop, if you like, a couple of years later, where you think, well, we need to transform, but we haven't got the money to do so. So you do have to be sort of forward thinking in that regard.
It seems like your history as being a lawyer, which I didn't realize at the time, this has really helped you with that analytical kind of process, that very kind of I don't know what the term is, like chronological processes. You have to have that in the back of your mind, of knowing that this is some of the pitfalls that companies and organizations and people in similar roles could fall into.
It's slightly paradoxical because cybersecurity is obviously a very technically orientated discipline, and there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of technicalities. At the end of the day, you're talking about technology, and I'm not a technologist by background. And I know that many technologists don't have a science or data or computer science background, interestingly enough. So it helps me, as you say, from a sort of GRC, governance, risk and compliance perspective. So, I can look at a new contract for the procurement of a tool or a service, for example, and I understand the contract because that's the background I herald from. So I can nitpick and pick out certain areas or inconsistencies. So I can do that part fairly well, and in some ways that has been transferable, bizarrely enough. On the technical side, obviously less so, but you pick it up as you go along. You learn these things based on the job, and before you know it, you're actually more technical than you ever thought you were or could be. But yes, the background that I've got in terms of rigor and sort of organizational skill and having an eye for detail, whether it's a legal contract or a program plan or whatever it is, yes, that's helped massively.
What's the second year you've prepared?
Second year I prepared was 2019. So this was after I'd left Diageo. At the time, the InfoSec team were growing. We were recruiting into new positions. A gap analysis had been performed by one of the big four to tell us that our security maturity had to improve across a number of buckets or domain areas, if you like. And I was out of contract at the time, and the phone rang, and so I was looking for a new opportunity. and I went through a number of interviews. I think there were 3 or 4 stages, and ultimately got the role. And I became a cybersecurity program manager. So I was responsible for one of those buckets or programs, which contained a number of sort of tasks and activities within it, as these things do. You know, that we were going to think about key vaulting. We were going to look at the way in which we encrypt data and whether we do encrypt data at rest and in transit, and the extent to which we do so across the complex environment that we have. I was looking at SDLC or SSDLC, end user developed applications, EUDA. There was a whole bucket of stuff. And it became very, very busy very quickly, as you can imagine. Currys, or Dixon's Carphone, as it was then known, had a breach in 2018. It's in the public domain, and that's why the spotlight was on Dixon's Carphone at the time, from the ICO, from the FCA, from other regulatory bodies, and we needed to prove, as one of the largest retailers in the UK, that we were moving that dial forwards. And so all of that work was born out of a sort of direction of travel to achieve that. And I was there to play my part. And the other thing I did was deployment of security tools to ensure that we had the monitoring and the visibility across our infrastructure. We have a lot of legacy debt, as I mentioned, so a lot of the stuff we couldn't secure or still can't secure, and we're looking to decommission because there's little we can do about it. But the stuff that was more modern, we were able to deploy to, and I think, sort of hand on heart, we have improved our security maturity greatly in the last 3 to 4 years, but it hasn't been without its challenges. A lot of this hinges on, business engagement and talking to server owners, application owners, process owners, and getting them engaged in the process of that sort of journey that we're going on around modernization and transforming. And sometimes people are more amenable to those changes. Sometimes there's pushback. So again, you have to navigate the business landscape. And somebody once told me in the team a couple of years ago, and it was interesting. He said to me, "Don't forget, we're an electronics retailer. We're not a cyber company. So what is always first is generating of profit and revenue, because that's what we do. Not that cyber isn't critical, it is, but it will come second, because cyber doesn't generate revenue. It protects revenue, but it doesn't have an ROI in the same way as selling product and insurance and credit and all the other things that we do has. And so you end up having to strike a balance between the need of the business to operate and generate money versus the need for the business to be secure and resilient from a security perspective. And that's an interesting conundrum, if you like, which we had to navigate. And I'm still here 5 years later. So overall, it's been positive. It's been challenging, but I relish a challenge. And we're still doing the best that we can to secure Currys for our customers.
So what's some of those challenges that you've overcome over your 5 years there? And what makes Currys a place that you would like to invest your career and your time with, the fact you've been there for half a decade?
There's a lot of meaningful work worth doing, I think. And as I say, I enjoy a challenge. So going in and actually transforming something and making it better, and in my world, improving the cybersecurity posture of that company as an organization, is definitely a lot of work that is worthwhile doing. Because had I gone in and things were, up to par, up to scratch, it would have disillusioned me very quickly. It's not an environment that I operate particularly well in. I need a challenge. I need things to be difficult to try and overcome them. So it's been engaging from the very beginning and continues to be engaging. So that's great. But I mean, I can give you sort of 2 examples if that's what you're looking for in terms of that transformation. One is trying to move off old sort of on-premise ways of working in terms of network architecture. So forgive me for being slightly techie, although as I say, I'm not by background, but getting off things like MPLS onto an SD-WAN and having a more software-defined architecture that allows for better transfer of data, more secure ways of working for some of our staff, if they're, for example, using a Citrix environment, improving the till network across the various stores that we have, of which we've got circa 300 or just over. SD-WAN has absolutely transformed the way in which the company operates and has made it far more well, it's made it less complex, and it's made it more efficient. And that's great. And we can now configure changes across our networking environment through various, dashboards and platforms where you're moving sliders or you're flicking switches, because it's a software-defined approach as opposed to routing and cables and sort of maybe archaic telephony, that kind of approach. So that's a great win for us, and we'll certainly as an investment we'll save money in the longer term. So that's one aspect. The other is we embarked on a SASE or SSE, Secure Access Service Edge journey a couple of years ago to embed better cloud solutions. And we use all three public cloud environments, the three big ones that we're all aware of, as well as a few private cloud environments. And a lot of this was about data loss prevention, for example. So managing uploads and downloads into the cloud, using a CSPM or Cloud Security Posture Management approach to managing the virtual machines that we've got in the cloud, the various containers, Docker technologies that we use, that our business heavily relies upon, to ensure that they're secure, that accordance to CIS benchmarking, for example, that our baselines are not misconfigured. And if they are, we can do something about them. So again, visibility, and again, it's down to monitoring. And we have other things like Secure Web Gateway, for example, which we also use. We're trying to achieve a ZTNA borderless communications and network type technology, in terms of authentication, in terms of access to apps which are brought closer to the users to reduce latency. A lot of that sort of component technology we're looking to bring in, again, to make the experience all round, whether it's for staff or customers, that much better and that much more efficient. So employing of new technologies, and looking at, for example, the Gartner Magic Quadrant to see who's best in breed, not just there, also from across, collaboration in the industry more generally, but understanding which vendors support which services. Is it worth procuring into a new technology? If it is, how do we embed it? How do we integrate it? And just looking at what there is to offer in the market, and having a budgetary conversation at the same time, obviously, but trying to harness these new technologies and work in a way that is more sort of not so much 21st century, but more technologically savvy and orientated, and also trying to future-proof ourselves from a technology perspective and where the company might go in future in terms of new acquisitions, in terms of growth, in terms of new product categories. We have to be ready for that. Technology is an enabler for business, and I think that cybersecurity is an underpinning for technology, broadly speaking. And so we need to be resilient today, but also in that sense prepared for tomorrow.
I know that you said you were part of the British Computing Society. Does that network of people, like-minded people, help you in keeping on top of the current trends?
There's certainly a lot to be said for joining various organisations, and I'm a member of a few. And it's the attending of meetings and conferences and speaking to people in the industry, fellow professionals, and understanding what emerging trends there are and what's available, but also talking about pain points, and frustrations, and the challenges that they have. And actually, a lot of these challenges, and it's not just to retailers in the retail space, but whether it's actually across the whole gambit of small, medium, and large enterprise companies, and obviously we fit into the latter category given our size. But a lot of these challenges and issues are the same, and a lot of them come down to basic hygiene, actually, which is what I mentioned previously. But yes, joining organisations, so the BCS, certainly the Cloud Security Alliance, the Executive Leaders Network. I'm a member of the NCSC Retail Industry Trust Group, the RITG, which is a vertical for all retailers, and it's a meeting that takes place on a periodic basis where all the retailers get into a room and we talk about common threats, challenges, problems. And there's a vertical for telecommunications. There's various verticals that the NCSC have. Again, excellent opportunity to discuss, to network. So that's great. There are various magazines and publications that are released, whether it's Gartner, whether it's IT Manager. There's a lot of stuff online. There's forums that you can read. They're all quite easily searchable. And as you say, it's about keeping on top of trends. It's very difficult to do when you have a day job, and you've got extracurricular activities as well, or you're studying, or you've got family. Our lives are very, very busy these days. So, unless you've got time during the working week to look at these sorts of things and read them, you're dipping into your weekend, which some may want to do, and others may be more hesitant in doing. So it's difficult. It's probably in the same way as medicine, that there are developments on an almost weekly basis, a new technology, a new solution, a new platform. So it can be quite overwhelming. And I think, as with anything in life, you're really doing as much as you can. But taking time out to travel to meetings and conferences and seminars and what have you, and joining them is time out of your working day. So therefore, you're giving yourself an opportunity to attend something, and then in that forum, making the most of that meeting or event that you're at. So ask the difficult questions, build your network, and then collaborate afterwards, which is what I found to be particularly helpful.
Just quite nicely onto our final year, I think, if you'd like to talk a little bit more about that.
So 2023, last year was the first time that I had done some public speaking at an event, and we were covering a broad number of topics. It was around cloud adoption, technology transformation, AI, which is what everybody's talking about these days, agile working, broadly speaking, legacy infrastructure, how to get off it, how to secure it. And there's always another topic that sort of surfaces as well, which is around how do you discuss cyber with your board, and how do you get the executive board to understand cyber and to sort of appreciate that cyber is a risk, as much as there are other risks around supply chains and growing in new markets or whatever it might be. So a varied sort of amount of topics there, and all of which gained traction. And probably about 150 people turned up to the event. The panel that I spoke at was around cloud transformation, and exactly what we're doing, which is using the 3 public cloud environments. We also have an on-prem infrastructure, so we run a sort of fully hybrid model, if you like, and the pitfalls and pleasures of doing that, and how difficult it is at times to secure. That it isn't necessarily as fast as we'd want it to be, and that there is still certain latency in place. The fact that everybody jumps on the cloud bandwagon. There's this phrase, cloud first. Well, in our case, we were cloud last. Actually, we had all of this on-prem infrastructure, and we were looking to move to the cloud. So not that it's an afterthought, by the way, but it was a transition. So we were cloud last. And there was a huge amount of work around completing that transition, that transformation. So that was the first event, and I've spoken I think 2 or 3 others since over the year. I suppose my sort of talks were focused around cloud adoption and AI, just because I'm fascinated in that subject, and I can read around it. Not that I wouldn't anyway, but certainly read around it prior to a panel discussion, so that you know what might come up and try and help head off various questions. But I enjoy that engagement, and I enjoy the collaboration of fellow panelists. It's great that people ask questions afterwards, and as I say, that there's then a lot of sort of scope for follow-up. So I think it's great, and I try and encourage my fellow colleagues at Currys to speak and speak more often, because I see the benefits of doing so. And apart from anything else, it gets you out of your comfort zone. It helps you to build confidence. So it's a great all-round thing to do, and I hope to do more in future. I really do enjoy them.
Is there some kind of trend that you predict it's going to blow up soon, or is there any more questions that are left unanswered by these events, or do you really kind of get a good, well-rounded knowledge of what is going on within the industry?
I think attending these events, whether it's just speaking or being a delegate and attending, you absolutely get an understanding of the key sort of technologies in cyber and who the main players are, and they can obviously discuss the offering that they have. There is always a conversation about future trends, and what the state of the industry might look like in terms of technologies and personnel. There are often conversations about what companies are looking to do in the future, and how they might adopt a new technology or a solution. So there's always a bit of sort of crystal ball gazing, if you like. In terms of trends that are exploding, I mean, not easy to comment on. The cop out is AI, obviously, and the future direction of AI and AI, ML, LLMs, NLPs, the acronyms that people talk about, today. As I say, it's inescapable. You can't attend an event these days without talking about AI and all of that. Um, there are aspects of GDPR that have an AI element within them. I think there is one clause that talks about the rights of people to not have their data processed through an AI algorithm, and there's an opt-out clause around that, which is an interesting not development, if you like, but a feature of that legislation. I know that the UK government is looking to legislate for AI fairly soon. I think the European Commission released a white paper recently around AI governance, and this is more around the ethical considerations of using AI and the guardrails and the parameters that we should be putting in place to safeguard the use of AI technology and to ensure that it isn't abusive or biased or prejudicial in some of the computations that it does and the algorithms that it has. At the end of the day, it comes down to people and the supervisory aspect over AI. There's supervised and unsupervised learning in terms of the building blocks of AI, but at the end of the day, there's a human at the end of the chain that calls the shots or pulls the plug if need be, and you have to have that human oversight. So it's garnering a lot of interest, and it's a developing space, and we'll see where it takes us. In terms of other future trends, I mean, a bit difficult to comment on. You caught me on the hop there. A lot of it is cloud-based, I think. People moving off a physical presence of racked and stacked servers and wanting to move to environments that are much more virtualized, which are easier to manage, can be more cost effective, and that you're only building infrastructure that you really need, and therefore not having infrastructure that's redundant. And everybody's looking to manage budgets these days, I think, and probably we live in a climate where budgets are more constrained. So when you procure a technology or a solution, you have to really know what the benefits are of doing so, and making sure that you maximize the features that it offers you. And a lot of sort of third-party suppliers and integrators and MSSPs are really offering to their clients, getting the best out of that product, and let's help you do that. So that's welcome, obviously. But as for future trends, I don't know. I'd have to, maybe at the event I'll say more, and I'll have a proper think about it in advance. But it's a good question, absolutely.
Great. But speaking about the event in March, is there any insights or anything you'd like to share prior to your speaking session?
I think it's really just what I said about AI. It's important to read around the subject and sort of try and get an understanding for where it might be going. And I think it is the maturing of these guardrails and parameters around its use, and also around its adoption as well. There are a lot of companies that jumped on the bandwagon and are looking to adopt it, and some have been very quick and ready to do so. I mean, there was the recent case of the Samsung employees who fed a lot of Samsung sort of corporate secrets into the AI machine, and it became very public very quickly. You have to be very careful around its use, and what it is that you share or what you don't share with something that is intelligent and automated, and might go off and reach conclusions of its own. But my insight is to sort of keep an eye on those developments and see what they bring, and because it's our future. Well, it's here today, but it'll only ever mature and develop in time. We're never going to take a backward step from AI. I don't think it's almost too far gone. But it's around its use. We have to guard its use and decide how we want to use it in a safe and ethical way. I don't know if it's necessarily topical for the event, but there are conversations now at the moment around the professionalization of the cybersecurity industry. And this is just maybe perhaps slightly anecdotal, but lawyers, doctors, accountants have a regulatory body, and they have to do CPD, and there are pathways that have been built for those professionals. Whilst there are cyber organizations that offer certifications, so whether it's ISACA, ISC squared, there are others. and they require CPD, there isn't yet a unified body, or not as I would see one, that regulates the industry overall. There is the UK Cybersecurity Council, which is still relatively in its infancy. I think it's circa 2 years old or so, which is looking to grow and is currently doing things like competency mapping, for example, across cyber. It's looking at cyber career pathways for professionals, either entering the industry or that have been in the industry but want to take a step forwards. So, for example, if I want to become a CISO, what's my career pathway? If I want to become a head of security operations, what's my career pathway? If I want to be a cybersecurity engineer or analyst and I'm starting out in my career, what is the pathway? So that's another space that I think is maturing, the professionalization of the industry and making it not credible, but recognized in the same way as some of those other regulated professions are. And I think there is a move towards that. I think it'll take some time, by the way. I don't think it'll be tomorrow. It's probably 12, 18 months away. And I know that the council is looking for people to support them in that journey, whether it's voluntarily or through paid positions. And they're looking to seek opinions and views from professionals. And at some point, there probably will be a formal consultation to get people's views, or at least I hope there will be. But at this stage, it's possible to put your hand up and say, look, I'd be interested in helping build what that regulatory framework, if that's a way of putting it, looks like. So that's interesting to me. And I think it will demand more of cyber professionals in the future in terms of, doing certifications and looking at their development. That there'll be more of a sort of requirement to do that. Because at the moment, you can have a lot of the cybersecurity qualifications. You can have a whole list of them and be a CISO, or you can become a CISO without having any of those qualifications at all, but you've got, say, 20, 25 years of experience in the industry. Now, that's not to say that one CISO is better or more competent than the other, but those are people with very different backgrounds. And it's not wrong to be accommodating of different backgrounds, obviously. But I'd like to see, I think, a bit more consistency, and if we can maybe produce a blueprint for what a CISO should be in terms of the experiential requirement, but also having certain creds and certs in place, then I think it would imbue the cyber industry with a bit more credibility and would put us on par with those other regulated industries. And I think that that would be a good move.
Those are excellent insights, and thank you so much for agreeing to speak this, I was going to say afternoon, but morning. And we can't wait to see you next month. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.